Sometimes it takes the population chart a little while to catch up to the situation on the ground in this case, especially because the pro-US, pro-South Vietnam population, it comes back more slowly. It's very easy to get some impact on sort of mixed populations for the VC, but when a place is strongly in one side or the other, the chart makes it harder to move it in the other direction. And also, you don't get any bonuses. There's nothing that increases this die roll. You can drop the die roll down. The average of 7 doesn't tend to shift things too much, no matter what the situation. But anyway, we managed to get a big pickup this time for the U.S. of 6 population going in their favor. So I feel like I'm winning the war, right? So did the U.S. until that. And even then, militarily they were. It's just the effects of the attack were so horrendous on public support. All right, on to the rest of the interphase activities. Definitely see that keeping this sustained ramp up is a much, much better solution. Now, there's still the big question, because last time I was playing, I was like, I'm keeping the U.S. in the war, but I never feel like I have, enough troops to do what I need to do. And then when the offensive came, Saigon fell. And that's got to be my big worry, is making sure that my replacements are high enough. But I think the overall commitment that I have, the replacements that I have, I can probably survive without losing Saigon, unless I do some crazy shit like commit forces to attacks and stuff during the offensive that I really shouldn't do. I should be getting the defenses into place when and as necessary. And give up what I have to, but I shouldn't lose the game over it. Last time I lost the game over it simply because there were no more U.S. reinforcements and enough forces were just pounding in constantly that I might have been able to survive it, but it was really ugly and I was losing full units and everything left and right. Pretty much set to go with the fall of 67 now, after the population stuff. Did some purchases. The U.S., no support for ARVN, which is kind of a problem because I got to get those ARVN replacements up. But my goal was to keep wiping out VC. But I do have an eye on that, keeping that replacement points up. So I bought a number of points. What I did was I bought myself 2 more, got 6 regiments now. That's 6 battalions, but 2 more Marine regiments. There are a couple of loose Marine regiments. I like the Marine stats. They have an extra artillery with them. The other option is try to bring the 23rd Infantry Division in, which has really heavy artillery support. Its headquarters has heavier support than anything else, and it comes with this extra freebie heavy artillery battery, which is an awesome thing to just get for free. So I probably do want to bring that in, but right now I'm looking at bringing in those Marine regiments because I had other points I wanted to buy. And the other choice was to try to keep it under 5 and not pay the extra commitment point. If you're going to go 5 or more, you want to go up to 15. It's just that simple. So I went with the 15 again. I got some more air mobile, some more air, and then a bunch of replacement points, 9 more replacement points. So I took a loss last time. My numbers were looking a little low. It's obvious that they're preparing for an offensive. I don't know if it's this turn. Turns out it's not. I'm going to be aiming for that spring of 68 Tet offensive. That's, why? Because it looks like that's about on the right pattern, and it cuts the air support that the U.S. has down significantly. However, in the officer replacement phase, I managed to get rid of the U.S. 4th Corps or the Arvin 4th Corps commander, and got a much better commander in who's fairly loyal, and that changes the landscape significantly. I can rely on Arvin a lot more down here. Now, even though that happened, the VC, you can see, put some pieces down in 4th Corps. They've gotten kind of complacent about Arvin, but on the other hand, they're also looking at, wow, there really is not a lot down here, and let's see what we can force them to do. And especially since the Marines and paratroopers who run off the Chief of Staff have not been effective most of this game. That's been really kind of painful because they're some of my better troops. I don't know if I had a better Chief of Staff originally and got a lousier one. I don't remember the case there. I definitely did boost those and make them, into higher valued units. So I would think I must have, because I remember being able to use the Marines sometimes. They have a chance, but it's not a very high one. I mean, he's not a horrible leader, but overall my Arvin leaders are pretty good. 1st Corps is the one exception. I absolutely cannot rely on Arvin up in the 1st Corps, but I got 1st Corps largely under control. There's a lot of U.S. forces in there. And 2nd Corps has, of course, been my happy zone for Arvin, but it's not very useful for that to be happy because it's lousy terrain, and it's hard to convince me that I should air mobilize Arvin units. But I bought more air mobile units. However, I did also buy more U.S. Regiments, and mobilizing them takes 6 air mobile, and I bought only 8 and I lost one last turn, so it's not going very, very hot there. For the VC, I built up what I could. Those 2 regiments that I had, I built another 34 battalions. There's still a few left in here. Just a matter of, wow, that's what I could get, and still keep myself. This poor delicate rule book. It's been through hell, I think. I'm leaving myself now with 8 VC supply pool, and I don't have a lot of padding either. I'm only 1 point off my morale in terms of commitment, but I'm hoping that the bootstrapping works well enough that I can afford what I need to do. But anyway, I did pull in another NVA division over here again, just foot divisions. I don't want to mechanize them. That causes too many problems, I think, at this point in the game. And most of my points, though, you can see 28 out of them were spent. Out of 38 total, were spent on the VC still. So I'm still really dedicating a lot of power points to the VC, funneling those extra population in. Turns out it's only when the population hits 4 times that I have to worry and start paying additional, which means I got quite a bit of space there. I did forget to write down the population growth, though, on the commitment chart. Then I rolled up the effectiveness of Arvin, and the big thing is there's a lot of stuff in 4th Corps that's now available in Arvin, and we're going to see, how big an effect that has. I have a lot of riverine capabilities, and there aren't a lot of VC down there, so maybe I'm just throwing them away by putting them there. And that's about it. We have a little bit of infiltration going on up here. For the most part, I was placing on the board, which is why you've got people down in 4th Corps. Yes, some of those people, like down here, those are political sections because there was no way I could trace down there. But the U.S. doesn't know that. They don't know the absolute state of my supply. They probably have a fair idea of it. But they don't know if I've got a bank of 20 points or if I've got a bank, as I did, of 4, So it's hard to tell what's rolling through. It's really hard to keep that kind of concept in mind. If you did a lot of reverse engineering of what your opponent's doing, you could probably get a pretty good number, but I prefer to go with, the U.S. has a vague idea. I know what it is, and let's not try to fake this at all. Let's just do the fudging in terms of I've got a fair idea of what they've got there, but not a great idea. It's just kind of the way I solo things for the most part. I didn't even roll. Sometimes I'll roll dice for decision making like that, but I didn't hear there. I don't feel like there's anything that was that, any decision that was that dependent on this knowledge yet. So having a general idea is good enough. I don't look at the NVA chart paperwork when I'm working on what the U.S. thinks they're going to do. And it doesn't really make much difference whether those are crappy battalions or political sections unless I try to do something riskier than I would dare do, like, send in a crappy ARVN unit with no gunpowder or whatever. I just don't do that. I play with the assumption that I don't know what I'm facing. And I use sort of a general calculation that seems to be working well, at least so far, for the U.S. And maybe I'm throwing more firepower than I need in some cases. But sometimes I run into something big and I've thrown too little in, That's what the reserve rolls are for, right? Yeah, it's not going to work way down there, I don't think. All right. So I'm going to go away for a while, but we'll be playing out fall of '67 soon. The combination of the VC coming back into 4th Corps and the ARVN being active down there at the same time is kind of weird. It's having an unexpected consequence, which is it's draining my air power for the U.S. Those ARVN units don't have a lot of firepower on them. I've kind of pulled most of the U.S. units out, and it's hard to reach certain areas, so I'm using ARVN units in a lot of operations down there, but man, I need to make up for the firepower, especially when they can run off into cultivated areas that are cheap. And I'm not having a lot of effectiveness either. I've used a lot of power up, and I've only killed 2 units so far. So far, I've only been concentrating down in 4th Corps. I like to do that. I like to look at one area at a time, but once you start eating up your resources too much, now I got to kind of worry, hey, maybe I need that little extra edge of firepower, with the Marines, with the air mobile units. Maybe I should hold off on pursuing more attacks down in 4th Corps until I see what I get out of it. Particular turns beginning to peter out. See, I used up all my riverine. Cleaned up a lot in the 4th Corps, actually, by doing so. So I feel pretty good about that. Elsewhere, my limiting factor now seems to be air points. And I'm kind of regretting the amount I put into strategic bombing because, I spent like 20 instead of the minimum or whatever. That would be another attack easily, maybe a couple more. I have a fair amount of air mobile, however, and I still have some artillery assets available, so I should be able to launch a couple more attacks. You never have the balance just right. You never know. I mean, among other things, you don't know what's going to come out of this. And you can make guesses. You can see what happened last turn and try to figure it out. But, I'm definitely having some difficulty, as always, making the choices of, what do I want to expend? What can I expend? Right now, I've still got some opportunities open though, and we see something new, at least for me, which is I don't think I've ever seen this before in a game, which is the VC too scared to stick around in areas. Normally, I leave them in kind of exposed locations because, hey, the U.S. can't squish them all, but I'm taking so many losses. I have so many replacement points built up for that offensive. My key right now is to try to maintain my number of units on the board. So I'm kind of fleeing from areas where the U.S. actually is active, which I haven't felt compelled to do in general. Even areas up here were getting cleared out. The whole north is clear now, except for over there in Quang Tri. So there's basically this huge clump of VC activity, and of course that's going to attract the U.S., and then they squish out like pimples that you pop or whatever. And then another area down here where there's a lot of VC activity, but everywhere else, I mean, even down in Anzuyan, 5th Division came down, and they're like, better run away, And you see them running into Cambodia up here, just to get away from where the U.S. can exert pressure on them. They can come surging back in at the end of the turn in order to get some population bonus or whatever, because basically if the U.S. wants to give passes, they can. But here's the thing. The U.S. could not use a significant amount of their force down here and hold it as a reserve. Again, this is new. It's not going to last for long, I think. Well, we'll see what Tet does. Because I think, the whole game's going to change based on Tet in a lot of ways. I've never seen a game go past Tet, because the only time I played it where I got to Tet before quitting, because the U.S. position was looking hopeless, was one in which Saigon fell. And I said, the U.S. position looks hopeless. And not going to fight too hard and kind of fiddle with. Basically, I could have cheated my way out of the loss with a little fudging, or maybe I could have found resources on the board that I could have kept committing. I'm not sure, but anyway, that was the situation there. Now I feel like the U.S. is actually really kicking some ass on the board. I've got tons and tons of divisions out there, and it's an impressive feeling. Of course, one of the things that I always looked at was, wow, I can't last till 75 if I keep pumping troops in. Yeah, that's true. But this heavier commitment is allowing me to stay in the game longer, which of course is better. Whether or not I can make it to 75, keeping the Arvin alive or whatever, I don't know. But I'm doing much, much more with the U.S. And I really have to thank the people who've given me some advice on how to play the game as the U.S., because it was apparently beyond me, and my parsimonious ways. So anyway, the U.S. did a couple of little operations within these VC movements, but there wasn't a lot that they wanted to do. As soon as the U.S. starts passing the initiative, it's pretty much the end of the turn. We actually saw some Arvin units moving around. I still have air power, but I don't know. 25th could do something. Maybe. Let's give them a shot at thinking about it, because I've got enough helicopters that I can pull one more thing in. I didn't want to do it, I think, because of 1st Division down here, but the point is, things have changed with the VC fleeing into Cambodia and everything. The world's different than it was a few minutes ago, and I should give the U.S. An opportunity to react to all this. One of the things that bothers me, at least a little bit, as I'm ready to enter into the second turn in this fall of 67, is I know Tet is coming. I know there's going to be a big offensive. Now, some of me can see it building up here. How much was the U.S. aware of that? Yeah, they probably were. But I don't fully understand it, This hasn't been enacted yet. In other games, and I think historically, the NVA actually made an incursion or two early on. Don't trust me on this. My knowledge of history is just off the top of my head, probably fabricated here. But I believe they made a couple of incursions early in the war, before Tet. And they were kind of repulsed. Maybe there was some bloody fighting, but there was kind of the feeling that, well, that's probably what this kind of gathering is for. But instead here, I absolutely know that Tet is coming. And I know that what kind of effect it's going to have on both sides. You can say that probably the NLF knew to some extent the U.S. wouldn't be able to stand the kind of bloodshed they would take in a colonial war with real Americans involved, etc. But the other side of it, though, is, you have the same kind of feeling in like a World War II game where you know that Pearl Harbor is going to happen. Or if it doesn't, your enemy has made a very weird choice. And you may even know when it's going to happen. And here, I'm pretty sure I know when that's going to happen. Certainly, the VC plan is to do it in the spring. However, I'm beginning to wonder if I can get away with it in the spring for the simple fact that, wow, can I take another turn? The next turn's attrition. Can I afford that? Should I even be on the board anymore? Should I have fled? Well, you flee and you start creating something different. First of all, you create a reason for the McNamara line to exist. There's no reason for it to exist if there's VC all over the board. But once they're outside of South Vietnam, it starts to become a more viable strategy. It's just so expensive you wouldn't want to do it. What it does is every time the NLF forces overall cross the border, or a border, between South Vietnam and something else, the U.S. is given the immediate next option for an activation. Now, that doesn't seem to make much sense at this point in the game, but after Tet, it may make a lot of sense. First of all, there won't be a lot of NLF forces on the board. Secondly, the next offensive can be kind of interdicted rather than wave after wave of attack, maybe trying to get Saigon or whatever. However, the U.S. has its defensive reserves. It can throw a lot of force in. You're not going to be able to take something, assuming the appropriate resources, especially in replacement points available. You're not going to be able to take something that the U.S. really doesn't want you to get. But here's the thing. If you could launch a bunch of attacks up here, cost them their replacement points, and then start costing them their units in this area, you can get it, And that's the kind of thing I have to be really careful about, because I could lose the game on that first offensive as the U.S. But, I know some people kind of look at it as, it's not a role-playing game. You don't have to experience things exactly as the commanders do, etc. But that's part of it for me, is trying to experience that unknown, etc. And, I kind of create a simulacrum of it, to tell you the truth. If I was playing this opposed, it would be a slightly different experience. I wouldn't be so sure that it's coming in the spring. I would be keeping my mouth shut about it as the U.S., perhaps, thinking to myself, maybe if I don't remind him, he'll forget that he has that tool in his bucket, and I'll be able to sleaze out a few more turns where I have this kind of dominating situation, and put him in a situation where he's really not capable of launching the offensive. And he may be in that situation right now. Right now, the losses built up. This is from the first turn, are at 24. There's a good chance I'm going to start getting morale off body bag count. That does not apply during the offensive. Thank God, because otherwise the U.S. would be completely getting the opposite. They'd basically get a neutralizing effect off the offensives, because instead what happens is each attack hurts the U.S. morale, and body count doesn't matter at all. But yeah, right now I'm in a position where I feel like I'm churning out a lot of stuff. Of course, the disadvantage is the VC are running away from me, so I'm not going to get that. I'm not going to get all those points that I want. Ooh, I got another. Yeah, we'll chalk this one up to the screw up. These guys probably did not want to be where they are. Not because they're in danger, but because they could be on a better mobility position, and they had not moved. But screw them. I cheated already once, and I've already removed all the ops completes and everything, so it's too late to change things. Anyway, we'll be going into that second turn of fall, and I'm having a pretty exciting time right now again. The tedium of the game, maybe I'm burning a little too hot right now in terms of playing, but not as hot as I was before I stopped playing for a while. because what really kind of works for me is to come up a little bit, play a little bit, and go back downstairs and maybe get a turn done each day, or maybe not, but somewhere in that range. The problem with that, of course, is if I get a turn done a day, and we're talking at most a week a year, and that's not bad. It really isn't, because we're looking at 11 years total, 11 weeks. That's 3 months. That's about the size of most of my big games when I play them. But this one, again, I took more than a month off, essentially, pissing about. It's 2 months between videos, but, I gotta say, it's not like I wasn't playing at all. It's just I wasn't playing much in there. But I was at a really hot rate before that, and now I feel like I want to go that hard more. I feel like I'm close to that today because there's more pieces on the board. So, I have to play more in order to get through a turn. But we'll see, because I think as the situation evolves, from what I've read about the game, about parts of the game that I've never gotten to, it turns more into a conventional war. And as it does that, well, then there's less that you have to do all these little things to hunt things down and everything. But I don't know. We'll see. We've had some operations here. The permanent air mobile units clearing out their areas. Nothing down there yet. I'm actually holding off on that because it looks pretty innocuous right now. And I may actually want to keep units in reserve to make sure these guys can't intrude without getting intercepted, essentially. However, started operations over here and chased some units down. By the way, the body count is huge right now. 25, 28, 32. And I still have a lot of my resources, all this air, a fair amount of air mobile, etc. So I'm expecting this to be a big body count turn. However, the U.S. just ran themselves into a big problem. This is basically, I think, 2 regiments and a divisional headquarters plus other assets there. And they just took 5 replacement points on that first attack. They've got a -3 on their pursuit modifier. This is not at all good. And I'm going to have to hunt down more units to throw in to continue this fight. This is going to possibly end up being one of those really bloody running fights that you very seldomly see, but when they happen, man, they can take like an hour, just because you could end up with fights all across the region, conceivably, through it, if more and more target hexes start showing up. That's unlikely. Usually the VC are going to keep all their forces in a stack. Chances are they'll be able to get away, but we'll see. One way or another, I mean, it's kind of iffy for a while in there. U.S. die rolls, we're keeping them in this range. The +2 to +3 modifier on there. They were taking casualties at a lower rate than the VC, but I was willing to expend them. But once I got up to the 11 chart, and I was just crossing into Laos, but the problem is this. I could have gone into here, and then I would force a U.S. invasion of Laos, which would reduce U.S. morale. However, it is almost certain that I'd be, with that big +7 modifier, I'd be at +11, 12, 13, +10 on the die roll. It's guaranteed I'm going to be getting 11s from then on. And what's happening there is 1 loss versus 8 losses. I can't maintain that, which means, if I force the invasion, yeah, okay. Is 8 more reserves worth that? I don't know, because that's what it would have come to. But then, presumably, I could have kept the whole division. It wasn't all a unified division. Some of this was part of the 8th Division, actually, but it amounts to a whole division of VC destroyed, as well as other units. So now we're at 25, 28, 32, 41, 44 points, which means, let's see, 30, 35, 40. Right now I'm at +3 morale for this. And I mean, if I could have drained this further, that would be great. It took me the whole game to build up this 100, yeah, it's flipped over for the 100 side, and 61 replacement points. How many am I willing to spend to try to keep that VC division alive? And the answer was too many. But yeah, I ended up just dissolving it all in the combat. Now I've got a big retreat. And here's the thing, I could have, I could get out with that +7 pursuit bonus. Everything's air mobilized. It's all going to get out of Laos, no matter how far in it goes. So there really was no good answer once it starts getting up in that 10 and 11. I actually should have dissolved when I hit the 10 chart, because that's getting me almost as good, almost a huge attack. So, I mean, I didn't, because the 10 chart was a 1-5 trade-off, which didn't sound that bad, but I didn't really think about the fact that, yeah, I'm not going to get any lower than, some pretty bad trade-offs. So the decision to just get rid of those was made, and this is a really massive turn for the U.S., killing the whole VC division. Yeah, I had to throw a lot into it. The headquarters and the 3rd Marine Regiment got into here to get into position. That gave me some fire support. The VC headquarters, too slow to run away in the mountains. It kind of sucks. I didn't realize that I could pin that in place and just start draining that. I actually needed to pin it in place and drain it because it kept some forces tied down that never really got a good pursuit because of that. That's okay. The Arvin unit isn't really good at pursuing. Yeah, technique that's new to me for this attack and why I haven't seen many running battles. Usually, I hit the VC withdraw a hex or whatever. I'm like, oh, I can get a much better bonus if if I don't enter their hex. Here I was entering their hex every time, and that cost me a little bit, cost me some of my pursuit bonus. There's no question of that. But it pinned them down and kept their movement much slower. So I didn't have to waste firepower to try to interdict their hex, which is not as effective as having troops in their hex. And it also allowed, it made it very, very difficult for them to advance. They were or retreat. They were only retreating 1 hex at a time. And that's pretty damn painful. And in fact, I actually, if I threw an interdiction point into there, they would not be able to retreat at all. Whether or not that's a worthwhile action, I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, those 6 movement units can't get out easily in that rough terrain. So there's some ways you can use the rough terrain to good effect, actually, which is kind of neat. Winding down the end of the season, the turn, whatever, both. Operations over in 4th Corps finished up with some Arvin units. The Navy pretty much was able to get that under control. I still got a piece kicking around, and somebody else is trying to sneak in, whatever. U.S. forces actually started providing some nice cordon action. Earlier in the game, you have not seen the U.S. forces being used for cordoning. Now we're seeing them used for that because I ran out of air mobile capabilities. And I still have a lot of air points. And the VC feel compelled to move some of their forces because everything was kind of concentrated in a couple little pockets. Because this has been such an effective turn for the U.S. And it's kind of throwing my whole TET plan into question because I was hoping to have viable VC forces for it, and it looks like I should have done TET earlier, honestly. And I think I did last game. But yeah, at this point, I feel like my VC is just being rocked too hard. Maybe I've actually escalated harder than the U.S. did historically at this point in the war. And it's definitely getting, showing the capability to throw control over things. The one thing is, I don't have any ground operation for those air units to support. So I could do an airstrike somewhere, and I got to consider it. Using firepower just on airstrikes or bombardments or whatever is really, really ineffective. However, I got something out of it. I managed to kill a political section, which doesn't actually help too much, but it gets rid of a unit that would annoy me. And it wasn't going to convert any population or anything, and it was sitting in the swamp, and it wasn't going to leave because too dangerous. And I hit some other units that were in kind of exposed terrain, like jungles and such, not as well. I got myself one hit that, they had to pay off and a miss. Nothing too impressive. Notably, I can't be bombing on here. The trail bombing is something else. It doesn't affect the units on it, so those big stacks are perfectly safe. Those I could really hurt if a stack like that was on the board. But for the most part, the VC are... they lost all their big units, I think. There's still a couple hiding around. I'm not trying to build more at this point. I feel like next turn, this is the winter turn coming up. I can build them on the turn of an offensive, but I need 10 North Vietnamese commitment for the offensive. And I kind of want to do it in spring when the U.S. is at their weakest. But this is going to be really hard to recover from. I probably would have been better off launching the offensive this turn. If I had any idea that the U.S. was going to be this effective this turn, wow. And, as they start to reduce the areas where there are a lot of VC units, and I can only crop up a couple in each area after this. That's not entirely true. Some of these areas are, like Quang Nam is very, very pro-VC. But, as it becomes more and more limited where I can place my units, and putting units down in 4th Corps, total crapshoot. Because if Arvin is effective, they can do a lot of damage to him. If Arvin's not effective down there, my U.S. forces have been shifting away from 4th Corps further and further. It's going to be hard for the U.S. to do much. I think I've still got an artillery down there. Actually, no, I think I've withdrawn all my U.S. forces from 4th Corps. So, except for that one artillery. So, yeah. So that becomes more of a, it might be worth it just to put some additional pressure before the impact of the offensive. Anyway, this kind of shows you, basically where the markers are, where the VC are trying to squish their way through. They're having a really hard time. I wanted to get into Bin Thuan. Well, I could only get one unit in there. That's not good. I wanted to get a second one, but no, I just couldn't slip it in. The cordons were too tight. And up here, likewise, I could get to Quang Tin, but I couldn't get up to the Quang Nam. I had to leave Quang Tri because too much pressure up there with one, Marine regiment. It's just like, forget it. In fact, I may build my units off board and just use everything in an offensive coming out of Vietnam going in. I'm not sure. Anyway, I think that's going to put me at the end of the turn because I don't see anything else the VC want to do. And the U.S., well, they've already made their decision. There's repositionings I could definitely do, like this artillery doesn't have to be sitting out there, possibly ready to be killed, especially if an offensive's coming, but we'll see. So, something that came to my mind as I started pulling off my ops complete markers, and I think I got them all off. It's kind of funny. There might be one over there. I really want to thank people who have given advice on this game, and especially those who have looked at my videos and said, you're doing it wrong. Not necessarily getting rules wrong, but, you know, which is helpful in some cases. But I don't think, other than my screw up with the VC regiments, which I don't think I've ever made before, but I may have. I feel like that advice has given me the confidence or whatever to go against what my best sort of intentions, what my natural inclinations are, really, which is, you know, make sure the U.S. morale doesn't go down and stuff like that. Don't bring in large quantities of force unless you feel like you need it. And yeah, some of my prior experience had taught me, hey, I need to ramp up faster. But I tried that last time. I'm trying it a little harder this time, but it's just so against my nature. But some of it is also kind of a funny thing to me, which is I don't have, through all my plays, I never kind of, and it hasn't been a game that I played all that terribly much, but I played a decent amount of it. It never really struck me what I need to do. And maybe it's because it's such a big game. When you're playing the campaign and nowhere else you make these decisions, and my inclinations were so far in the other direction that it was very, very hard for me to fight against those. And, you know, it was a slow ramp up towards, just like I slowly ramped up the U.S., I slowly ramped up my decision to ramp up the U.S., where, you know, I won't keep it below 5 each turn. I'll go up to 15 a turn for a while. And I mean, I've been cranking away at 15 a turn for the game so far, which to me feels outrageous. You know, it's like, no way I should be dropping my morale like that. But just in terms of natural tendencies. But yeah, I mean, throughout my life on my own, I might never, especially given the quantity of games I have, I might never have fallen upon just how hard I have to hit and some of the other decisions like consolidating a unit. That's maybe not that big a deal, because in the limited version of the unit, you can use it in if you have a broke down version, you can use it in the same fashion as a consolidated unit, and it costs you the same as long as you don't make the headquarters separate. But yeah, I mean, that kind of thing really didn't hit my eyes, and maybe I'm making equally bad judgments with the VC as well, and that's now they're suffering pretty hard. But you know, it was almost like a breakthrough that I'm not smart enough or whatever to overcome what my inclinations are, and it's really, really impressive to me. I don't face this problem, I think, as much when I'm looking at most games. But with this one, yeah, I really feel like, you know, I don't feel like there's so many moving pieces, etc. in it that I just don't feel like I had an easy grasp of, yeah, this is what I need to do. This is where I'm going wrong. Usually after a play or two, I get a fair idea of what I should be doing that isn't working, unless the game's totally cracked. And to me, I thought this game was totally unbalanced. Not just unbalanced in terms of who can win the game, but unbalanced in terms of the U.S. could not match, you know, their successes when following what felt to me to be a fairly reasonable ramp-up strategy. And, you know, part of that is I don't have a lot of knowledge about Vietnam. And there are so many levers you have to play in this game that, you know, maybe that knowledge would have helped me. Maybe knowing how many divisions were going in, maybe knowing how many air points, but I mean, you know, and air mobile, etc., are going in. But those, once you start, you know. So for example, I have a fair idea, and had before I got into this. In other plays, at least, it takes a little while to get the practice up. I had a fair idea of how much air mobile I need for forces, how much air power I need for forces, just to support them on the board, how much artillery, and certain concepts of you know, dispositions. And those seem to be holding up pretty well, at least for the U.S. forces. Finding Arvin always to be a disappointment. It just has a lot of trouble taking on the VC, at least. It might do a better job against the NVA. Anyway, I just wanted to get some of these words out because by the time I get around to my final thoughts on this, I have no clue whether or not that's going to be there. It may get there in some appended version, redacted version, not appended. But yeah, I mean, it may be much smaller, but the general concept might be there. But I feel like there's something really, really, you know, major that I've gained in this playing, and that's nice. So the military situation, politically, things aren't going so hot. I lost 2 points of population overall. It was looking a lot worse until I got to 4th Corps, where, you know, get a lot of areas that are high population. Some of them are maxed out, and absolutely no VC activity, no free fire zones, nothing. So that kind of evened things out. I don't know what we can look here. I mean, things don't change drastically, you know. So in this region, you got a lot of VC. Down in here, you got a lot of VC population. Up here, you got a lot of VC population. Even things like Khartoum and Tuy Duc are pretty good. One of these over here, Bien Dong, is very good. Some of 4th Corps is still zeroed out. Gokong and Zuian got zeroed out again. Vinh Binh. These areas, you know, once they get anti South Vietnam and U.S. intervention, etc., once they become communist enough, it's really hard to turn them around, you know. These things have been clear for a long time, and they're just kind of wobbling around in that 1-0 range, just because the way this chart works, you have to get above a 7 to get a positive effect, and below a 6 to get a negative effect. Well, yes, it'll drift towards the positive, but only so slightly. And, you know, there may have been a turn with a -1 or whatever, and that skews it a little bit in the other direction. These areas where there's a lot of VC activity, those are really, really hard. You know, those are die rolls that are going to go against you no matter what because of all the minuses. There's not much you can do about them. And you can free fire them. But that gives you a decent amount of minuses anyway, and the troops can scatter. So it's tough. It's not like I'm not trying to clear these areas out. Some of them I have. Phu Yen is 2 out of 7. That's pretty weak. Can Hoa is 2 out of 11. That's very weak. And I've, you know, had cleared it, but some troops slipped in there. Bien Thuan is 1 out of 6, but that's clear, you know. And if you look at these, a lot of things were on you know, we're able to drop a point or 2 points and just drop up in terms of, you know, they're a third of a point each because of this thing. And things were just in a position where a lot of things fell negative this turn. Last turn they fell positive. That gives, I don't know, my total population I think is 209 for South Vietnam. And that'll get us to all the other decisions. I'm in a talkative mood. But after the economics on this one, I'm a little disoriented, actually. Oops, I haven't marked everything yet. I haven't gotten all my markers in the right place, which is okay because it's all on the sheets. So what happened? First thing that happened was, after doing the population, I just started filling out what I wanted to buy with the U.S. And I'm like, wait, no, I'm not supposed to do that. But I had completed it all. I hadn't replaced them, so it's okay. And in fact, it's actually not that bad an idea to plan your buying before you choose your strategic bombing or something like that. But anyway, I went with the standard strategic bombing, got the standard result. No losses, one hit on the trail. In terms of Arvin, we'll talk about, we'll just talk about them. How about that? They had a little drop in loyalty, but effectiveness-wise, they are almost entirely effective. I rolled a 1 for their effectiveness check, and the only thing that's out of play is whatever the hell's up in First Corps, and that's not a lot. I ended up buying new regiments and upgrades for Arvin, and I'm giving them more and more control in the 4th. Basically, the upgrades went there. I built out this 21st Division because it looks likely to remain in play, although the decrease in loyalty was a problem there. In terms of morale, that big pile of troops I killed, that was worth +5 morale for the U.S. Now, I don't know what that all matters, because they're at like 490, but they're actually going to gain morale for this turn. I went with the full 15 buildup, though, because this was an expensive turn for the U.S. in terms of having to buy replacements, both for themselves and for Arvin. When I looked at, the level of replacements that I wanted to get, I said, that fills out my points. I won't be able to buy any air mobile, and I know I need more. And okay, we'll see what we get. That gets us up to the 200 commitment, which opens the final of the Free World Allies Thailand, and they have the most complicated rules for it. I didn't completely look into them. I've told you them in the intro, I think, but they rolled their die. They didn't get their first set of reinforcements. But what really bugs me about theirs aren't free. So they're like Korean or whatever. But there's like things that get replaced and stuff, and I don't know if you have to pay twice if that happens or whatever. I'm sure there's something reasonable about it, but I don't know. For the U.S. itself, most of their points were spent buying supplies for Arvin, actually. But they bought some replacement. I bought a pair of heavy artillery. This is, you know what? I don't want to lose Saigon. So I dropped one in there. That'll help a lot in defense. And I put another one up in Hue, now that I know how to pronounce it. I might want more in other places, but my feeling was, there could be a lot of North Vietnamese divisions coming in from up there, for all I know. I think we're going to be facing an offensive either this turn or soon after. Let's spend the points on these and, try to keep these major cities open. It may not turn out that Hue is in any danger, but Saigon I definitely want protected. The reason for Hue is that I only have like one little Marine regiment up there because I've been chasing forces down here. Well, now you can see the VC have really kind of concentrated their placements to what extent they can. And where they couldn't, instead of going over in 4th Corps, I put them, that's the guys who are leading out. These guys infiltrated. I put them on the trail because I have to preserve my force for the offensive. The downside of all that is the easiest place to attack is probably down in 4th Corps. But, honestly, that is all the things that are good about that area are good for the U.S. and Arvin. There's, a lot of cultivated terrain, which is great, if you can get the VC to be in there, but it tends to be risky to be in, and there's local forces that'll join in and help. So that's no good. Wow, this really shouldn't be empty. I know I've got extra units kicking around. I built a whole bunch of them and I didn't get them all in place, but I've got things in stupid places. That really should not be open. Something was garrisoning it that I could move. And oops. Losing a capital, even temporarily, has an impact. So I want to get something there during the strategic movement. But let's see what else. With the VC, I did upgrade a couple more regiments. I only built 34 of my battalions. That means the cup has a fair amount of stuff in it. It's just a matter of I don't have enough supplies coming through to build all my units anymore. Just in terms of how much I had programmed on trail supplies. But by keeping the trail supplies where they were and the upgrades, etc., that they are, I got to build myself another division. I've moved all the divisions southward. I feel like they're more capable of handling the clear terrain or cultivated terrain than some of the other units. And I want to have them with road access, etc., so they can kind of get where they want. None of them are mechanized. I could upgrade them next turn. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think I'm going to have a lot of points to build stuff. But my plan is to launch the offensive during the lousy weather. Anything else that I wanted to say? I don't think so. So I'll just repair what I have on the charts. So far here in the first turn of the winter, the U.S. has been very active clearing out Kanhoa and south along the coastal region. You can see there's still VC units operating closer to the border. But if we can clear this out and create something of a perimeter, yes, VC can still show up deeper in, but they're having trouble placing deeper in because they're not doing sea supply so far, and I may need to change that. And we can kind of concentrate on where the heavy weight of the attack could come, where it could actually do some damage, which is coming out of the trail. However, I moved up here, and 3rd Marine got involved in something ugly, and they managed to kill 2 regiments. But basically, they slammed into them with one of their heavy units and a headquarters, and it wasn't enough. Losses about equal for VC and for US forces. That's where I made the mistake. Actually, instead of air mobilizing, I threw more troops in, which is a mistake. The heavier troop forces enabled me to keep the attack going, but I couldn't get, good pursuits off of it. And I was also taking too many casualties because I have too many U.S. troops involved. So you can see the U.S. Replacements has dropped way down. And then I air mobilized one of the units, which is what I should have done to begin with, in order to pursue. The headquarters was already air mobilized. And that worked a lot better, just that one unit air mobilized against, a couple of regiments. Although I did throw in some ARVN units to absorb losses eventually. And at that point, the die rolls were getting high enough that it didn't look like I'd make it to the border. And I'm basically trading VC, heavier VC losses for ARVN losses. I don't like making that exchange. So I took the losses rather than allowing, we were over here. I also created a lot of free fires. Now, it's not that big a deal. This area is really problematic. This is sort of the heart of VC activity in the north, is just these locations up here are really, really low population for the South Vietnamese. So it would have been a lot nicer, though, if I had more forces available in like Quang Ngai or something. I have some artillery available. but I don't really have a lot of capability to exert additional pressure. This was 3rd Marines area, and I threw too many units in. I would have been better off air mobilizing from the beginning. Maybe throwing one extra, one more, so 2/3 of the U.S. division into play instead of throwing it all in. But whatever. Yeah, screws up. This first turn of winter is kind of winding itself down. We can see the U.S. largely cleared out down here, adding to the safe zone, right? And a bunch of work over here as well. We had an interesting situation where the Anzac unit smacked into this big regiment. Now, I had support around me, but the regiment was able to slip away, and the odds just weren't very good with the firepower I had available. It didn't make sense to fight there, so I'm going to actually let that regiment escape. And unfortunately, since it's late in the operating turn, I don't have a lot of resources to commit to trying to destroy that. Like, I could have made a secondary attack if I had enough air mobile or something, launching, these as my core of the attack. And I could have also brought them in if I continued the attacks, but chances were the odds on this, it was going to be like a -4 to the die roll. So I was going to be down here where I'm not going to get any pursuit or anything. I don't know how good that Anzac unit. It's not bad at pursuit, but I just wasn't going to be able to get anywhere without air mobilizing. And I'm going to try to find another operation I can do, but we're kind of running out. One thing that I wanted to note that, remember those heavy artillery I bought with the thought of, well, if the offensive is going to start, I'm going to need these for defense. They're pretty damn useless because I can't air mobilize them. I'm actually finding uses for them, driving them up the road and using them, to get me some interdiction or something like that. And they also kind of steer the enemy in a direction that I wouldn't otherwise have well covered. I'll look up there. That's probably my best chance for some kind of operation. Larvin operation took place down here. They got my air power down to about 5. I still have capabilities to throw another operation into play, but I've held off on it, and the VC has started repositioning, running away largely. Call it a strategic withdrawal, whatever. Pulling out of these areas where there are a lot of U.S. forces capable of doing things, scrambling things up by getting that big regiment out of the way, so I'm less sure where it is. It's probably back here somewhere. I think that's where it headed. It's hard to keep track of things. If you were playing this opposed, it would be even harder, I think, to keep track of where your enemy's moving his pieces. You probably have to move your eyes away from the board at some point or another just to relax while they're taking their turn. But you can see a lot of things have run out of South Vietnam, or Vietnam entirely, actually, running away from the free fire zones. I'm still in Kontum pretty heavily, although that's free fire. So there isn't a lot of U.S. force there, and I feel like I can withstand whatever they're throwing. Over here, this is a potential place where there's a lot of U.S. forces that could operate in Quang Nam, but Quang Tim, Quang the guy, they're gone. We just left. There's no reason, I can slip back in before if the U.S. moves most of their pieces. If they don't move many pieces, then they're not using their pieces to attack mine. In terms of body count, it's pretty high, 26, which looks like it's online to easily break that 30 again, and maybe get close to the 50 that we had last turn. That got us a huge morale boost. And that'll put us at the second turn of winter, basically. I think basically the U.S. is watching what the VC is doing and just, pass. It's really hard and I know also from my opposed plays, it's also hard there to kind of get back into it as the U.S., as you watch VC units move away. So this U.S. unit, this probably wanted to move as these VC slipped away. But what do I do with it, Well, what the hell? Let's look for opportunities. I think that's probably the fairest thing to do. The problem is I have to make sure. So, for example, these guys could do something. So keeping those ARVN units available in that air power, that actually serves some value. Likewise, I want to keep power available in case they go charging into 4th Corps. If I use up all my resources, then it's more likely that, that the VC can just act with impunity and occupy places that maybe I don't particularly want them to, although they seem to be trying to withdraw for the most part. A little iffy on these guys, but I don't have an easy way out that looks pleasant. There's a lot of forces operating throughout there. I don't have a safe place for them to run to, so I'm going to probably leave them where they are. So continue on through the U.S. In my very slow fashion. I'm really not playing this very hard. Getting a few hours in a week at most, which is not sufficient, I fear. But the U.S. is largely clearing things up. Again, I'm expecting TAT on the next video. But one of the things that was pointed out to me was I may agree, I may be not being aggressive enough with the VC. I feel like the VC are getting hammered pretty badly by this increase of U.S. Commitment. But the point is, my replacement points are always at a fairly low number. I kind of, somebody who has more experience with this, I think, and certainly seems to be more comfortable about the game, has stated he tries to keep his replacement points at around 30 as a minimum, for the U.S. If they go below that, he'll start launching attacks with the VC to try to get a few units killed and for the U.S. and drop their overall morale that way. I have not been doing that. Among other reasons, my VC feel pretty heavily pushed, and yes, it is possible that you could, get those kind of reductions, but honestly, I'm causing casualties by the U.S. stumbling into shit enough that I don't really feel like I need to push it too much, and I don't feel like I have enough VC for my offensive as it stands. I'm having trouble keeping up with that, so I don't know if I'm doing that terribly. I don't trust my own intuition on this game at all because it's been proven so wrong with the U.S. side as well. But it may make a difference. So the guy who's talking about he's committing, the 25 point, which is a couple U.S. morale a turn. Well, if you're committing that heavily and hurting your morale that much, the morale cost may be easier to accelerate by, causing U.S. casualties, digging into those replacement points harder. And certainly, those replacement points are more expensive for the U.S. than for the VC at this point. But the replacement points for the VC are going up and up in cost. So, again, I don't know the balance. There's so many levers in this game. Previously, when I've played, I tried using the VC more aggressively, and what I found was they really pay the price whenever they're used particularly aggressively, because the U.S. can just throw in whatever the fuck reinforcements it wants, basically. As long as they have anything capable and available, they can. Now, towards the end of the turn, when I start moving all my VC units, there are usually not that many U.S. forces available, but there's still usually enough kicking around that it would take one hell of a massive attack. This actually brought something up I was thinking on my way to go dancing, or maybe on the way back, which was, One thing that seems to be missing from the game, which may allow for the VC attacks to be kind of good, yes, you can throw lots of reinforcements in, but you have to have them available, which means you didn't use them. And more than that, they get used up, so you can't use them again. And you don't control the initiative on the attack, which is to say, attacks never swing from, oh, look, the VC attacked us and now we're pursuing them. That just doesn't happen. I would say there probably isn't much capability for things to swing in the other direction where, like, the US attacks and the VC start throwing stuff in. That is generally a bad idea, but if the US starts throwing stuff in, you would consider that there might be a pursuit after a victorious battle. And I don't really see that. The only way that can happen is, okay, now they're clustered, after their attack that they failed. Now, it's possible with interdiction, etc., to force somebody to stay in your hex and keep fighting you. But I don't know that the VC necessarily have to be in your hex in a position where they have to keep fighting. So, of course, you can reinforce into their hex, but yeah, it does present this kind of different sort of circumstance from what I think should be a capability that the U.S. should have, which is to turn the battle from one where they're being attacked to one where they're pursuing. Bit of a weird situation where the U.S. has a lot of resources available to them, 15 air mobile left, 70 of their air power left, but the VC isn't in a position where they can really be hit by much. I could certainly, attack something near the border, but those have a chance to duck behind. I also have this desire to move forces up towards the border in order to better, interdict any movements coming across. However, if I do that, I'm making it harder for me to react if the VC start coming closer. I don't have a lot of units that are within, that are really all that capable. I have a fair amount of U.S. forces down here. Even some of the 101st Airborne is available. But it kind of feels like I want to let the VC move forward a little bit, and I've started letting them do so. But I might be at the point, by passing, I might be at the point where the VC just say, yeah, you know what, I'll take the pass. I want to kill off all your activity that you have stored up. That will mean a large increase in pro-US population, though. So I'm not quite sure where I'm going yet. Something of a compromise. I infiltrated a few units deeper around into places where the US couldn't easily interact, and then called the turn. Because, the US is kind of like, there's a lot of stuff that could come in, could cause some damage. I don't want to make any decisions until that's moved. Well, both sides take an opportunity cost on that. Allows me to get out of the turn quicker too, which is a bonus because I'm having trouble actually playing. So this is, I guess, the end of 1967, and we'll be pushing into 68 in the spring.